Hello, my name is Russell Myers. Welcome to Issues Unite. All right, so I know that I have covered some of this in the past, not completely comprehensively. But the fact is that sentiments are changing about Ukraine somewhat for the wrong reasons, as Americans suffer more financially while we send more money over to Ukraine, which, by the way, last week Biden or our government agreed to send another $1.7 billion to Ukraine while Americans are still suffering. Yeah, gas prices have come down a little bit, but that's not going to remain that way. The reason that gas prices are coming down is because of lack of demand. That's because consumers are spending less, traveling less, etc. So, you know, and that means industries, businesses are closing down and laying people off. So there are people that are still saying, oh, well, you can't trust Putin because Crimea. So it's time for a history lesson. All right. Crimea was not invaded. After far right wing elements violently overthrew the Ukrainian government in 2014, the people of Crimea held a public referendum in which over 90% of them chose to rejoin Russia. Note that at the time, there were less than 200 Russian soldiers on Crimea. They were only there as a security force. Keep in mind that this referendum occurred after the events in Odessa, where neo-Nazis burned 30 people to death at the trade union hall while Odessa police stood by and watched. A small security force was very much in order. The day before the Crimea referendum, there were a few fistfights, which were handled by local police, if even that was necessary. The day of the referendum, there was no violence at all. The soldiers and police were not on the streets and not at the polling locations. Nobody was allowed to vote in the referendum unless they lived in Crimea. The reason that Ukraine claims the referendum was illegal is because Ukrainian national law states that if a region wishes to secede, it must be decided by the Ukrainian parliament. You know, the same right-wing parliament which they wanted to secede from. It was at this same time that the people of Donbass overthrew their local government offices, demanding to be considered autonomous, but still part of Ukraine. This was initially denied by the Ukrainian parliament. They attacked the civilians, hence the battle for Donetsk airport began. The civilians had no military equipment and no military. Yet they were bombarded with missiles and mortars invaded by Ukrainian military. Keep in mind, the only military which existed for Donbass at the time was the Ukrainian military, as this had been part of Ukraine. People were shot down in the streets. Men, women, children. Homes were shelled and destroyed. What happened then was that the Donbass people managed to seize some military equipment and launch a defense, forming their own defense forces. Most of the people of Donbass and Crimea are primarily Russian-speaking. They consider themselves to be ethnically Russian. Yet the Ukrainian parliament voted to outlaw the Russian language in speech, reading, and writing. Imagine if I told you that you could not read, write, or speak your own language on threat of being arrested and imprisoned. It was these events which led to the creation of the Minsk I agreement in late 2014. Yet, the Ukrainians did not abide by that agreement. Then, Minsk II was agreed upon in early 2015. This was signed on to by Ukraine, Russia, France, and Germany. Officially, Ukraine claimed to abide by Minsk II. However, that is when they sent on in the Azovs and right sector, along with other neo-Nazi civilian militias. Somehow, these civilian militias had access to high-grade military weaponry, howitzers, mortars, rocket launchers, drones. If you doubt any of this, I encourage you to go to Patrick Lancaster's YouTube channel and watch his early videos. He has been reporting from Donbass for 8 years. You will find videos of him in trenches in Luhansk while shells are landing all around the trench and drones flying overhead targeting their location. He lives there and is now married to a woman from Donetsk. All of these attacks by Ukraine is what led to Russia providing weapons and aid, but no military personnel to Donbass. In spite of that, between 2014 and 2022, Ukraine continued advancing in Donbass, seizing over half of the region as it existed in 2014. Over 14,000 civilians were killed, and unknown thousands were displaced, losing their homes and businesses, driven out because of the very real risk of being imprisoned, tortured, or murdered for the crime of speaking Russian. This is not an exaggeration. Western media, the UN, and Human Rights Watch had been reporting on the human rights abuses by the Ukrainian intelligence service since 2014, up until February of this year. Then all of a sudden that all stopped. Anyone who as much as suggested peaceful relations between Ukraine and Russia was considered an enemy of the state. They could be seized, interrogated, tortured, imprisoned, assassinated, or disappeared. They operate very much akin to the Nazi SS. You can find these reports very easily with a simple web search if you include the years of 2014 to 2021 in your search parameters. In February this year, Russia had completed their training maneuvers and withdrawn from the border area. Immediately afterward, Ukraine built up troops, 120,000 troops, along the line of contact with Donbass. They increased shelling to a massive degree, thousands of shells a day, destroying homes, water treatment, communications, and electrical services. Intelligence intercepted by Russia showed clear indication that Ukraine intended to invade Donbass and conduct genocide of the region. It was at that point that the Russian Duma voted unanimously to grant Putin the right to use military force to invade Ukraine. At first, Putin signed the agreement for use of military force, but refused to mobilize the military. He tried using diplomacy, asking Ukraine, to cease their activities. The Ukrainian activities intensified, and Ukraine cut off all diplomatic contact. 2 weeks after signing the use of military force. Putin ordered military mobilization and invasion. Since then, Russian and Ukrainian negotiators have met on several occasions. One Ukrainian negotiator who was in favor of a peaceful resolution was arrested and shot to death by the Ukrainian intelligence service. Ukraine has made specific agreements in person in negotiations, then submitted a written agreement which omits everything which was agreed to in the in-person talks. This has happened several times. And Zelensky has said on several occasions that he was ready to negotiate until, the U.S. and NATO said, oh, no, don't negotiate. We'll give you more weapons. All right? In addition, a total of 15 political parties in Ukraine have been outlawed since early 2021. Just being a member of one of the outlawed political parties will have you arrested and imprisoned. All media has been seized by the Ukrainian government, airing war propaganda 24/7. No dissent is allowed in that country. Remember that Ukraine has been named the most corrupt government in Europe since withdrawing from the Warsaw Pact in 1992 and continuing up to today. This has been widely reported in Western media all the way up to January of 2022 when the Wall Street Journal reported on it. So here is your history lesson. Everything I have stated here can be easily verified if one exerts a fairly minor degree of effort and ignores opinion pieces by Western corporate warmongering media. Those that claim that Russia should simply withdraw their forces and then negotiate afterward show willing ignorance of facts and an intentional refusal to do any investigation beyond Western media, which has never once objected to any military adventurism by the U.S. government or NATO. They also refuse to hear any historical record which does not fit the propaganda which they have consumed. They will claim to be in favor of peace, yet only on terms dictated by Western governments whose actions, decisions, and rhetoric had never once in world history led to a peaceful resolution of any disagreement. So please share this article or video. Talk about these subjects widely. If you can afford it, please donate whatever you can to help expand this channel and my presidential campaign. I thank you very much for watching. I hope you have a good day.